Welcome to an incomplete guide to personal growth. We invite you to take a breath and take a listen to our podcast that explores the wonder, humor, challenges, and sometimes those self-inflicted wounds on a journey of personal growth.
Our weekly podcast conversations include stories, resources, and tools that you can incorporate into your daily life. We're the mother-daughter duo of Sydney
and Kelly. Hey, Sydney.
Hi, Mom.
How's it? I'm good. You're in the process of doing some moving, and
I am.
so you're tired.
I'm very tired.
But it's a good tired.
Yes, but
Isn't that what they say?
It is a good tired.
Yeah.
And in the process of moving, we were clearing out a whole bunch of stuff, both of us. Because, we have a whole bunch of stuff. And so we took some books to have price books, which was good. I mean, you never get
much money for it, but
you feel like you're.
But you have to. The key to it is you have to wait for them to process your books.
Yes.
Right. And so while you're waiting, what are you going to do? You're going to look around to see what books you can buy.
Yes.
And so here we were looking and looking, and every book I picked up, it was like, oh, I saw this TV show.
Yes.
Oh, they made a TV show out of this. Oh, they made a movie out of it. And I finally figured out that if I wouldn't watch so much TV or stream so much, I had time to read books.
And read the books. Yes, that was our epiphany at Half Price Books the other day.
Maybe I should read more and then watch this stuff. But I'd already seen everything.
Yeah, but I knew of all the books. But yes, we knew of a lot of books because we've seen the shows.
Yes. So.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yes.
Do you do a lot of reading, our guest today, Hannah?
It depends on the kind of book. I am definitely more a watcher than I am a reader. But I do a lot of audiobooks, though. That's my preferred.
One of my friends is so into audiobooks, and she will listen at like 2 times or 2.5 times speed. For real. And her husband walked by and be like, how do you understand what they're saying? But she's done it so much that her ear is trained for it.
Oh, that is crazy. Yeah.
She knows what they're saying.
Oh, that is, well,
that's crazy.
It just ties in.
That's true.
That does tie in, because here we've got Hannah with us today, Hannah Kauffman, who is a speech pathologist. Yes. So maybe she could understand stuff that we couldn't.
I know that does take a lot of training, though, to be able to understand language and comprehend it that quickly. Like, that's definitely something that takes a trained ear. I don't think I could do it.
It's so funny.
I don't think I could do it.
Yeah. So we're really glad to have Hannah with us today. And we're going to be talking because you're a speech pathologist. Mm-hmm. And I think the way you got into it and became interested in it is really fascinating.
Yeah.
And you work with geriatric patients now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So let's start out with how you got involved in it, because I think that's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I grew up in Maryland and have a background in theater and singing and performing. And when I was in 8th grade, I started working. My best friend's mom was the founder of a theater company in Maryland called ArtStream. And the concept is there are mentors and directors and artistic leadership that are people that are neurotypical. And then the actors and performers have a disability in some capacity or neurodivergent in some capacity. So I've worked with patients, with actors that are blind, patients now, but actors then. That are blind, that have autism, that have language difficulties and deficits, traumatic brain injuries, many different people along the spectrum. So some people really high functioning that can appear normal or, pretty neurotypical to somebody. So I served as a mentor with that organization for 5 years from 8th grade until my senior year of high school. And probably when I was in like 10th grade, after doing working with this company for 3 years, I was like, They're, the actors are older in their, late 30s and into their 50s and 60s, but like their speech is improving and they're able to communicate more effectively from now than they did when I first worked with them. And is there a job that I can have where I can work with people in improving their language, improving their speech? So I just did a Google search one day, like what jobs can I
Yes.
have where I help people communicate, and I found speech pathology. And when I went to undergrad, I was like very convinced I was going to work with the pediatric community.
Mhm.
I wanted to open a private practice with speech, PT, OT, music, and art therapy all in one roof. And then I took a class in undergrad about swallowing disorders and voice disorders, and coming from the singing background, I was really intrigued and inspired by that. So kind of after I took those classes, and figured out that people can improve their quality of life and how important swallowing is and how important communication is later in life after stroke or traumatic brain injury.
Mm.
I was like, this is where I feel the most comfortable. And I did work with kids growing up as well. I worked with a different theater company in Maryland called Imagination Stage, and that had a mixture of neurotypical and neurodivergent children. So I had experience working with kids too.
Mhm.
So seeing both ends of the spectrum, I was like, okay, I can work with the littles or I can work with the grown-ups, and
Yeah.
kind of the grown-ups is where I kind of landed and where I've been for my career.
Yeah.
That
That's
is,
so cool.
I love how, one thing can lead to another.
Hmm.
This early experience led
Yeah.
to a career, to your
Yeah.
vocation.
Yeah.
I love that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing with working with older patients or after strokes or whatever, you probably had a lot of like neuro class. You have some neuro classes and stuff too for that.
Yes, yeah. In grad school, we had a neuroscience
Mhm.
class with an anatomy lab. So we learned like all the complexities of the brain
Mhm.
and what goes into injury. My externship, my final semester of graduate school, was also at the level 1 trauma hospital in West Virginia, where I went to graduate school
Mhm.
at the height of COVID.
Oh.
So I was seeing yeah, baptism by fire
Yeah,
is
Yeah.
for
what
real.
I how I describe that. So
Wow.
yeah, walking in the first day, and my uh the lead speech therapist at the hospital taking us into an ICU room with a patient that's intubated, and she's like, when this patient gets extubated, they're going to be your patient. And I'm
Mhm.
like, oh my god, like it was mind blowing to me,
Wow.
like not knowing now but not knowing then the process of intubation, respiratory failure, extubation, and
Mhm.
then recovery thereafter, and the role that speech therapists play in that. So seeing that all kind of play out in a very intense
Mhm.
setting
Yeah.
set me up really well for where I am now for, the really neuro heavy stuff that I work
Mhm.
with strokes, and
Yeah.
a lot of like dementia too. So seeing where someone's dementia is in, because there's a different type of dementia. So depending on what type people have, and the breakdown of
Mhm.
language thereafter with the dementia can
Yeah.
also be something that I work with on a day to day with my
Wow.
patients.
That's amazing. I don't think about that.
No,
I mean, I
no.
think about stroke,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
dementia tying in with
Mhm.
that.
Mhm.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
So, and you kind of mentioned this with the kids you worked with and like seeing their communication improve and like I'm sure
Yeah.
personality, or not kids, but the adults, sorry, that you worked with when you were in high school and stuff, and their communication improve, and I'm sure some personality I would think come out and stuff. Do you like see some of that now? Do you see because I feel like communication is just so important just as human beings, and then to just
Yeah.
all of a sudden lose
Yeah.
part of that, it's like, and is that like a cool journey to see?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I work with patients and families in regards to communication is establishing a new normal after injury. So a new normal of, your loved one had a stroke and this is how they're going to communicate, or this is the best method in which they can communicate with you.
Mhm.
And for some people that continues to be verbal language, and for some people that ends up being using a device or using like a communication board, which we often see with young children, and that's typically not something that you would think works with the adult population, but especially like early on in stroke recovery, as we are seeing verbal language as well as receptive understanding language, seeing those two start to improve over time. Sometimes we need to start by making language really, really basic, asking yes, no questions, asking really concrete questions. Tell me your name. Who is this family member? Where are you right now? So I think that's the biggest adaptation between working with like the population that I worked with in high school versus working with the populations that I work with now. And there being a trauma and then recovery after the trauma and how that may look different for patients and families.
Wow. We, it's funny because we had a friend that was in a car accident and was in a coma for 3 months.
Yeah.
And he, he taught, he's fine now. I mean, pretty fine.
Yeah.
But he can sing. He loved to be in a choir because he can sing without any of
He had like a list,
a little bit of a lisp, you stutter and thinking, but when he sings, smooth as can be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
So I have a background in musical theater, and I've been singing since I was 5, and I went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania for undergrad, and I studied musical theater performance and was cross-trained in operatic performance as well. And I have a friend of mine and then a student that was, I think, 3 years older than me. And he had a really bad stutter too, and my friend has a stutter as well. And it's always been super interesting to me that singing kind of takes away the stutters. I think it's because it's more focused and controlled than just kind of off the cuff language. Like when you're talking to people, like you kind of plan and prep your brain for the performance or for the song. And then there's a lot of research that shows that there's different innervation. There's different, like, cross-wiring of the brain when music is involved, and different areas of the brain are involved with music and language. So utilizing both of those are things that we use oftentimes for people that have stutters or have disfluencies in some capacity. That music training, it's called melodic intonation therapy, is also another therapy that we use with patients that have had strokes, because sometimes they're ebbs and flows of language change. So they're not going up when they ask a question or going down when there's a period at the end of the sentence. So retraining what's called the prosody or the intonation of language is also something that speech therapists use, which again crosses over with music. And I don't think when I was in high school, I realized how much crossover there was between speech pathology and music. And when I was in undergrad, people were like, "You're crazy for going into speech therapy. Like, it has nothing to do with music. You're never going to use your musical background." I use my musical background every single day. Every day of my life,
I mean, for real,
I am using music, which is so cool in some capacity.
Yeah. I even think about in undergrad, I would, so my background's piano performance. And so I would be in a few vocal lessons, like with people who needed a pianist to work with. And I mean, the amount of diction they worked on, pronunciation, how to make it fit with the music, please, you would use, of course, I can definitely see in speech pathology, like using that.
That is, yeah.
Oh, for real.
So you still get to use.
I think the idea of what speech pathology is for some people is so narrow, and it's just like, oh, you work with kids that have stutters and have lisps and can't say their R's, and that is but it's true. Like I was home this past weekend, and my cousin was asking me, she's like, "Yeah, how's working in school?" And I was like, "I work in a hospital." I was like, "I'm not working with kids right now." And she was like, "Oh, speech therapists can work in a hospital?" And I was like, "Yes, they definitely
do.
They totally can." So no, like the idea of what a speech therapist is, I tell people really often that, so My title is a speech dash language pathologist.
Okay.
Like in my like documentation,
Yeah.
that's what it says.
Mhm.
And I say that so much of what a speech pathologist does lives in the dash of our name.
Mm.
So speech therapists work on stuttering, articulation, language, swallowing, voice, communication devices,
Yeah.
social interaction. So working with adults and people that are neurodivergent, specifically on the autism spectrum. So it's not just this like one pigeonholed idea of what a speech pathologist can do. And there's also speech pathologists that work in like NICUs with babies that have feeding
Swallowing.
difficulties.
Okay.
Um, yeah, like swallowing difficulties, feeding difficulties, difficulty latching when feeding.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a speech pathologist can literally work with someone from the day they are born until the day that they pass. And I think that is like we see the whole
Yes.
spectrum of everything. And it's so cool to be in that community and to have that be at my foot at like an
Yeah.
option at any point in time. Like tomorrow, if for whatever reason I wanted to quit my job, which I'm not if my boss listens to this, but if that were if that were to happen, I have training in how to work with kids.
Yeah.
And we have training in classes and in graduate school about working with children and about language acquisition. I had a friend of mine last week text me because her daughter is 4 and she's concerned about some of her language. And I told her, I was like, everything that your daughter is experiencing is very typical for her age and for her language development. So like she's exactly where she needs to be. Like if it becomes an issue in X amount of time, like then yes, you would maybe want to pursue something. But again, like I haven't worked with kids for 5 years, but I still have this basis of knowledge of working with kids that I can utilize if I need to, if I want to change my career path for whatever reason. But
Yeah. Then you can do that.
I'm able to do that and I have the knowledge
Yeah.
to do that.
That's so cool.
So, because you're in the helping profession, right? And I think
Yeah.
a lot of our listeners are.
Mhm.
Do you or how do you cut off so you don't take it home?
Mm.
Because I'm sure there are certain cases that probably get you more than others.
Yeah.
How do you care
Yeah.
for yourself? How do you make sure of that? Or do you?
Yeah, my cousin and I were talking about that because over the last couple of months, I don't know what it's been, but we've had a lot of ALS patients.
Oh,
So a lot of folks that are experiencing ALS. I had a gentleman who is in his early 50s and was diagnosed in November. And as of like maybe what is it, June, so maybe like March, he had a tracheostomy and is ventilator dependent with a feeding tube. And it sometimes it's really hard, like it's a lot of compartmentalizing things and
mhm.
being like, this I think what keeps me going is I did the best I could with this patient and I helped make their life better while they were with me. And I did the best I could to bring them the most amount of joy and to give them their language or to help them eat and drink some of their favorite foods, to enjoy a meal or Thanksgiving or Christmas with their family. And sometimes it is hard, like I would be lying if I said that my coworkers and I don't check the obituaries every once in a while to see this patient that we had,
I love,
has gone, if
yeah.
they've passed. So it does take an emotional toll. I think it's a lot of just me reassuring myself that I did the best I could. I helped them the most that I could.
Yeah.
And when they discharge and what happens beyond the walls of my hospital, whatever my families and my patients
Yeah.
decide to do is on them. But I did the best I could in helping
Wow, that's
them.
good. That feeling of
I
like,
love that. And two images came to mind. One of them, because I used to do some stuff down at a homeless shelter and addiction recovery, and you don't know
Mhm.
what happens when they leave. You
yeah.
don't. And Vincent Van Gogh's "Sower in the Seed,"
Mm-hmm.
where he's just scattered seeds.
Yeah.
That's what you do,
Mm-hmm.
and you
Yeah.
trust
Yeah.
that what happens next, and I think, and when you're thinking about speech pathology and we think about hospital, we think about, oh, healing, it's done. Well, healing
Yeah.
is this moment,
Yeah.
and it includes death,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and making that
Yeah, part of it.
a part of it, and like you said, making that
Yeah.
comfortable for
Well,
them.
yeah.
And what a gift.
And I think
Yeah.
too, like when you reassure yourself, it's just knowing we've talked a lot about being enough. Like this is enough. Like
Yeah.
Yes.
feeling content
Yeah.
in that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you have to, and caring for yourself and them.
Yes. Yeah.
That's wow,
Yeah.
heavy.
Yeah.
Well, and I think something that I am not good at in my day-to-day life is living in gray space. I'm a very like black and white dichotomous. It is or it
Yes.
isn't, but like the gray space is not really where I like to
Yeah.
live.
It is very
Um
uncomfortable.
and Yes, but it's so interesting because in my job, I have no issue
Mm,
living in the gray space. I have no issue being like, it's this or it's that, but if it's something else, that's okay too.
mm,
I think because I am guiding decision making, I'm not
right.
necessarily making
All of
a
it.
full stop
Yeah.
decision, you know.
Ah,
I get that.
Um
Yeah.
sometimes I do,
Hmm.
you know, especially if it's a patient. I had a patient in March who was an older lady with ALS,
Hmm.
mm,
and we one of the things that I do in my job is x-rays of people's swallows. So they drink a contrast and we're looking to see if anything is going into the airway causing pneumonia and respiratory illness.
Yeah.
And at bedside she looked fine, but then when we did this test, you know, a lot of stuff was going into her airway and it was not safe for her to be eating and drinking. So I had to be the one to
Yeah.
say, either we opt for hospice care and she eats and drinks freely, or we give her a feeding tube and she doesn't
Hmm.
really eat or drink much by mouth anymore. And I run into this like really often, that the decisions that I make for my patients guide comfort feedings and comfort measures with hospice therapy versus life
Yeah.
prolonging but limiting and maybe decreased quality of life for what time they have left, if that's what families opt for it to be more aggressive.
Yeah.
So
ah,
my coworkers and I talk about it all the time, that I never thought that I would be that important in that decision making. But
Hmm.
when you deal with patients that are as sick as the patients that I see,
Yeah.
you are that decision maker. And in my hospital, with my colleagues and with my medical teams, I'm so grateful that I am as well respected as I am, and my decisions
Yeah.
and my clinical judgment is as well respected as it is, because that's not the case for everything.
Yeah.
yeah,
And like I said, again, you know, like sometimes patients will say, well, Hui, with your recommendations, I want the cheeseburger. And I'm like, you know what, Chuck, live your truth and you eat the
Yeah.
cheeseburger. Like, absolutely do it. But again, all that I can do is make recommendations and
yeah,
educate, and then impart that education onto my families and say,
Hmm.
here are the risks. If you're willing to accept the risks, that's on you.
Yeah.
And something too is families will often be like, I don't want my loved one to go into hospice because that means that they're actively dying. And it's like, you're there, they may be like,
Yeah.
it's possible,
Yeah.
but also like you're wanting to value their comfort and their quality of life and respect them and have them have autonomy as a person, which I value more than anything
Oh
else.
yeah.
So,
yeah,
you
Absolutely.
know,
Yeah.
yeah,
going back to what you said about like how do you separate things,
Hmm.
is I give the education and I make it a conversation, so that way it doesn't fall entirely onto me, and that it's something that, a decision that the families and I come to together, and we
Yeah.
say, this is what I think is best, this is what you think is best. Where can we find the common ground
Yeah.
between both of those wants and
That's so
yeah,
desires?
cool. Have Have you seen, like, have you had either patients or families come in and they didn't, I don't know, they either kind of dismissed what you're doing or like they didn't really see much value. And then have you seen them change? Like, have you seen, I mean, because that's a
yeah,
form, like
you're
a
right.
form of personal growth. I think if
I
people kind of
wouldn't,
realize they didn't have the right
yeah,
outlook at the beginning or they didn't have the
Yeah.
right kind of opinion at the
mhm,
beginning about
yeah,
stuff. Have you seen that happen?
Absolutely. Yeah. A lot of times what happens, especially with, you know, people having pneumonia and having aspiration pneumonia and issues with their breathing, is once you start to aspirate and once your once your swallowing physiology sort of breaks down to the point that you are aspirating and you're in the hospital as often as you are, like, yeah, sometimes I'll have patients come in and I'm like, this is what we talked about last time and now you're sick again. And we're kind of in this like endless loop of like, this is what I'm saying, this is what you're saying, this is what the swallow x-ray says, this is what we're talking about being best and safest for you. Like, are you going to come around to what I have to say and maybe do this with your solids or do this with your liquids or implement these strategies in order to help you? So it does happen. And I think that I'll invite patients, family members to come down to do the x-rays with us so they can see what's happening in real time. And I'll go over the imaging with them and I'll say, here was the aspiration. Here's, reflux or retention in the esophagus that's causing them to feel X, Y, and Z. And then for me being a visual person, I know that that's helpful for me if I am like looking at something objectively. Like I really try to be really objective and say, I'm not just saying that your loved one needs to be at a nothing by mouth status because I want them to, because that's never what I want. I want everyone to have the Philly cheesesteaks and the hot dogs and the malts and whatever else. Do you know what I mean? Like that, I want them to have that so badly. But what's more important to me is that my loved ones eat and drink the foods that make them happy, but it's also the safest. So sometimes that visual of like, oh yeah, there is a bunch of stuff going into the airway. That's what's causing them to get sick. And that's why they're in the hospital every 4 to 6 weeks. Unfortunately, sometimes it does take a couple admissions to the hospital for people to be like, well, shoot, like, of course, this is why they're sick. Like, it makes so much sense. Like, now I understand. So, unfortunately, sometimes it does take a couple times or a couple interventions. And sometimes people just don't care regardless. Like they could come to the hospital every month or every 6 weeks or every 2 weeks and they're sick and they're just like, I'm going to keep doing what I want. And that's when you say, you have autonomy as a person. This is your decision making and this is what you're going to do for yourself. And I have to respect that. Just because I don't agree with it or I wouldn't do the same thing, doesn't mean that it's a bad decision. It just may not be what I would recommend or what I feel would be in the best interest for a patient and their plan of care.
You got a lot on your plate when you got a lot of, these are big decisions.
Yes. Have you always have been, I guess, like, so good with a view of like, well, that's their autonomy, they can have, or have you had to grow into that? Because I feel like that's a personal growth. It's like,
I'd be going, y'all are wrong.
Is that part of like maybe some of your own growth that you've had?
Absolutely. I think, again, in my personal life and in my day-to-day decisions, for me, it's like, it's my way or the highway. Like, I like things to be done my way because my way is right. And I know that if I do it, then it's going to be done correctly. So in my day-to-day life, I very much like love being the decision maker. I love guiding decisions. But it was one of the first like really difficult situations I had with a patient where they really didn't want to do what I recommended within the first couple of weeks of me being at my job at the hospital. And they were like, I'm going to do what I want to do. And I got really upset. So I called my boss about it, and her and I had this really beautiful conversation of like, put this in your loved one's shoes. Like, imagine this is like your uncle or your grandfather, and make that decision as though you're caring for that person. And I took that to heart really seriously because I would want my grandpa or my dad or my mom or my grandmother to be comfortable, and I would want them to be happy, and I want them to be informed. And I think that that was the biggest shift for me. It wasn't necessarily like it's my way or the highway and my way is the best, because like, is it actually? Yes, but is it going to make the patient the happiest and keep their quality of life and acknowledge their autonomy and acknowledge their wants and their desires? maybe not. And that's what matters in the end and in the long run. The long and the short of it is, am I going to make my patient's life better for longer with my recommendations?
Yeah.
You know?
Mhm.
Wow.
And I think that sometimes there's a lot more sometimes the decisions are a lot more life and death
Yeah.
Yeah.
than
Sure.
some people make them out to be.
Hmm.
I had a patient at the end of March, maybe the beginning of April.
Mhm.
He had come back to the hospital several times, and he was young-ish, in his like late 60s, and he had had many strokes, like in big hard-hitting places in the brain that do cause more swallowing dysfunction and do cause other issues. And I did a different type of swallowing assessment with him, which is called a FEES, a fiber optic endoscopic evaluation of swallowing. So basically, what it is a scope that gets passed through someone's nasal passage and looks at the swallow from the inside in like a bird's eye view.
Yeah.
So I did this with him, with my student at the time, and you know, the daughter was in the room and she was very emotional, and the patient was very emotional. And it's a patient that I had visited with many times, so I was emotional about it, and I was like, you know, I really want you to be eating and drinking. But we went over the images, and I was like, this is going into your airway, this is causing you to get sick, you're not feeling when this is going into your airway, which is going to keep you from getting sick because of all of the stroke, which is going to keep you getting sick
Yeah.
over and over and over again. And you know, the daughter and I stepped out with my student, and the daughter is incredibly emotional, and she's crying, and she's like, I just want what's best for my dad. He doesn't want to, you know, get a feeding tube. He just wants to live. And I'm like, then so
Yeah.
Ah,
guiding the decisions and being like, what I am saying is in the best interest of the patient, and then that also being well respected and well understood by the patient. And it's not easy. It's never an easy conversation to be like, hey, if your loved one continues to drink their Diet Mountain Dew that they love so much, they're probably going to get aspiration pneumonia and abscesses and die.
Yeah.
wow.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
and sometimes it has to be that blatant of a conversation.
Yeah.
And that never gets easier. And I tell my patients and my families that all the time. I'm like, it never ever gets easier. I live for the day that it does, but that hasn't happened
Yeah.
yet.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
definitely not.
It's human. It's people.
Yeah.
You're dealing
Right.
with people
Mhm.
that have feelings, and yeah.
No, definitely.
Gosh.
Do you feel like?
I did, you know, do you see areas in your personal life that have grown because of what you
Oh,
do?
that's a good question.
Yeah. I am Patience is never a virtue that I have had
Pain in the rear. Yeah.
in my day-to-day life. No, I mean, I think I've always been a really big empath. I think I've always cared very deeply. I love very hard, and I care very deeply about the people that surround me in my life, and the people that are that I have chosen to fill my life. Um I think I've become a lot more patient with myself as well, in terms of like, I can lay my head down at night knowing that I did the best I could today. I talk about this a lot with my friends, and I had a choreographer when I was growing up, who there was one day in rehearsal that she introduced this concept to us, and we all stood in line at the door walking into rehearsal, and she took about 30 seconds with each of us, and she asked us, what's your percent today? And you would say that you're at 60% today. And she's like, okay, I'm sorry that you're only at 60% today, but I need you to give me 100% of your 60%. So
100% of the.
that
Okay.
yes, of the 60%. So whatever you are at today, you have to give your best of that on a given day. And that's what I tell my patients, because some days they're really tired, or I see them after dialysis, or I see them after physical therapy, or friends are moving into a house, or they're
Yeah.
changing apartments, or they're having a really stressful time at work,
Mhm.
and they can only give me so much.
Yeah.
Which is totally fine and valid, and I would expect that same grace of other people with me. So I think that mental shift that I've had in my own life from maybe like 14 or 15 years old until now, has been something that I impart on my patients, and something that I expect of my patients, because like sometimes someone can do a 35-minute session with me, and sometimes they can do 10, and I have to be okay with either of those, and that both of
Yeah.
those get to be valid and okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, and at least in my personal life, I feel as though I am much less quick to judge. I think I very much try to take a step back and look at the big picture of things, because like most of the time that the family member is screaming in my face, it's not because of something that I did.
Yes. That
It's
is true.
because of like other things that are going on,
Yeah.
which is totally fine. But like, you become a safe space for those people because you're taking the time to sit and listen, when maybe the doctor doesn't have 35 minutes to sit and
Yeah.
listen
Yeah.
and provide guidance and provide education, because they've got all these people to see, but you become someone that really knows this person really intimately. And the family really loves and respects and admires that. So definitely reflecting and taking a step back to look at the big picture and try to meet people where they are
Yeah.
on that given day, I
Yeah.
think are the biggest things that I've taken into my own life from
Yeah.
working in the setting that I work in every
Yeah.
day.
That's so good.
That's great. That
That's
is
such
so
good
good. What
advice.
a boy, have my eyes been opened.
Yes.
You know, because
Yeah.
when talking to you, I was like, well, speech pathology. Okay, we're going to learn how people that used to not be able to say their R's can now do it, and they feel better about
And
themselves.
S's. I couldn't say
You
my
couldn't
own
do it
name.
either. Yeah, you couldn't
Couldn't
say
say
your
my own
name.
name.
But, you know, I mean, that it does, it spans the lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool.
That is really cool. I still thank you for being
Yes,
with us.
Thank
This has
you.
been
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me. I'm so glad. Yeah, I
yeah.
think it's so important to like understand what people do, and I
Yeah.
think that like I said, even
Mhm.
my own family member, you know,
Yeah.
this past weekend, who I love and adore, I love my cousin, but she was like, yeah, like, aren't you working with kids in schools? And my aunt looked at her, she was like, look at her sideways. It's like, no, I
That is
don't.
so funny.
It's like, not even close. No,
Yeah.
I was like, I haven't worked with kids. I haven't worked with kids since the spring of 2021.
Wow.
That's when I had my school
Yeah.
rotation in graduate school.
Right.
And that was the last time I worked with an R or an L or an S or any of that.
But
That was the last time. Ever
yeah.
since then, it's
Yeah.
been, you know,
Right.
geriatric and adult population
Yeah.
gung ho.
Well, I think
That's
that's
cool.
great that we've learned about that
Yeah.
because
Mhm.
our listeners have parents
Oh yeah.
who are getting
Yeah.
older, not me,
Not
but
you.
other parents
Other
who are
people.
getting older,
Other
and
people.
you don't know when you deal with stuff.
No.
And now
Yeah.
there's somebody
That's
that
good.
you know, I'll be knowledgeable about this when I can't swallow and you're trying to stuff food down me. But yeah.
Yes.
Yes. As the loving daughter.
Only feed her when she's alert and awake.
Yeah.
I tell people that all the time, because people are like half asleep and they're shoveling mashed potatoes in their mouth, and I'm like, what are we doing? Why are we doing this? Let's take a step back and look at this objectively. What about this seems like a good idea?
None of it.
It does not seem like a good
None of
idea
it.
at all.
Love it.
Bad idea. Bad news bears. No. Like, only feed when alert and
Yeah.
awake. I tell people that all the
I'm
time.
gonna call you when they're trying to do that to me, Hannah.
No, Lauren will call me and she'll be like, I need help.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Oh,
Well, thank you so
thank
much.
you.
So we look forward to next
Yep.
week when we take a breath and take a listen.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of An Incomplete Guide to Personal Growth. There are many ways you can stay connected. Follow us on Instagram at An Incomplete Guide Podcast, where you can sign up for our email list and get posts that delve deeper into our weekly topics. Make sure to subscribe to our podcast page wherever you listen to your podcasts. We would really appreciate a rating and sharing us with your family and friends.
We're so glad you chose to spend your time with us and hope there was a thought, a resource, or a laugh that you can take on your journey. We'll be here every Tuesday for you to take a breath and take a listen.